I came home early to surprise my husband. Instead, I found him locked in the garage, barely breathing. My name's May Whitmore. I'm 70 years old, and I thought I'd seen enough heartbreak for one lifetime. But that night, standing in the dark doorway of my own home in Columbus, Ohio, I learned that betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from the child you raised. I had been gone for 11 days. My younger sister in Phoenix had a heart scare, and I'd flown out to take care of her. The trip drained me. I missed my husband, Ray, every single day. He's 73, a retired school principal, and lately his memory has started slipping. Not full-blown Alzheimer's yet, but the kind of forgetfulness that worries you. So before I left, I made sure our daughter, Alyssa, would stay with him. Alyssa sounded so loving when she promised. "Don't worry, Mom," she said over the phone. "You just focus on Aunt Clara. I'll take care of Dad like you would." I believed her. I really did. When I pulled into the driveway that night, the house was too still. No porch light, no TV hum, no soft country music Ray usually plays when he's alone. It was just quiet, the kind of quiet that feels wrong. I grabbed my suitcase and stepped inside. The air smelled stale, like no one had opened a window in days. The clock on the wall was ticking loud enough to fill the silence. I called out, "Ray?" No answer. Then I heard it, a faint, rhythmic thump. Pause. Another thump, thump. It was coming from the garage. I froze. Every horror story I'd ever read flashed through my mind. My hands shook as I reached for the garage door, but it wouldn't budge. Someone had installed a new latch, one I'd never seen before, with a thick padlock holding it shut from the outside. That's when I heard him. May, that you?" His voice cracked, rough and weak, like sandpaper against glass. My chest tightened. "Ray, hold on, baby, I'm right here." I ran to the laundry room, grabbed the old hammer from the drawer, and slammed it against the lock again and again until the metal snapped loose. The door swung open, and what I saw dropped me to my knees. Ray was sitting on the concrete floor, wrapped in one of my old quilts. His skin looked pale and sunken, his lips cracked and dry. A half-empty water bottle lay beside him, and in the corner, a bucket with a towel draped over it. The smell of sweat and something sour filled the air. "May," he whispered, his eyes wide and glassy, "I thought you forgot me." I knelt beside him, my hands trembling as I touched his face. "No, sweetheart, no, never. I'm here." He tried to smile. "Alyssa said you told her to keep me locked in here, said it was for my safety." My whole body went cold. Alyssa? My daughter? The same girl who used to cry when she scraped her knees? The one I worked double shifts to put through college? She said that? I helped Ray up, every step fragile as glass, and guided him to the couch. I gave him small sips of water, checked his pulse like the nurse at church taught me, and called 911. My voice shook as I told the dispatcher, "My husband's been locked in our garage, I think by our daughter." While waiting for the paramedics, I looked around, and that's when I noticed it. The house didn't look like ours anymore. Our photos were gone from the mantel. Boxes lined the hallway labeled kitchen misc, bedroom linens, and garage tools. Our wedding album had disappeared. The bookshelf where Ray kept his jazz records was half empty. It wasn't just neglect. It was preparation. The EMTs arrived and took Ray's vitals. One of them frowned and asked softly, "Ma'am, how long has he been like this?" I don't know," I stammered. "I'd been gone 11 days. The medic looked at me, then at the door with the broken lock. "He's lucky you came home when you did." Lucky. That word echoed in my head as they carried him out. Before I followed them to the ambulance, something caught my eye beneath the couch. A folder, half hidden by dust. I pulled it out and froze. On the cover, in my daughter's neat handwriting, were the words, "Power of attorney, urgent." My stomach dropped. I hadn't signed any power of attorney. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just betrayal. It was a setup, and the person behind it was my own blood. When I saw my signature on that paper, I knew my own child had sold us out. The ambulance siren faded as they drove Ray to Riverside Hospital. I stood there in my quiet living room, the same room where we celebrated birthdays, laughed through Thanksgiving dinners, and danced when no one was watching. Now it felt foreign, like someone else's house wearing mine as a disguise. The folder in my hand trembled. My name was on the power of attorney line, written in blue ink. My signature, or something meant to look like it. But I don't write my M that high, and my loops don't close like that. Alyssa must have copied it. I sank into the recliner, holding that folder like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. A few hours later, I sat beside Ray's hospital bed. He was hooked up to IV fluids, his skin pale but calm now. A nurse told me he was severely dehydrated and malnourished, but would recover physically. I thanked her and waited until she left before whispering to him, "Sweetheart, tell me again what Alyssa said before she locked the door." He blinked slowly, eyes distant. "She said you told her to keep me safe while she sorted some papers, that I was getting confused about money, that I might mess things up." My throat burned. I'd never said any of that. Later that night, I called our bank. The woman on the other end sounded kind until her tone shifted. "Mrs. Whitmore, are you confirming the transfer to Everstream Capital, the one for $120,000? My heart stopped. "What transfer?" She hesitated. "It was authorized 2 days ago under your power of attorney, your daughter, Alyssa Miller." The words hit like ice water. I wanted to argue, but she had proof, digital forms, voice verification, even an email from me. I hung up and pressed my palm against my chest. Betrayal doesn't just break your heart, it hollows it. The next morning, I went back home to gather things for Ray. That's when I saw the rest of the mess. Drawers ransacked, my jewelry box half empty, Ray's old pension papers missing. The computer logged out of all accounts, except one, Alyssa's email. I shouldn't have opened it, but grief makes you braver than you expect. Inside her documents folder were scanned papers, bank statements, property deeds, and the power of attorney form. Every single one had my forged signature. In a subfolder labeled Zane's Fund, there were emails to an attorney about liquidating assets and wiring funds to a company in Florida. Alyssa wrote, "He won't notice. Mom trusts me, and Dad's too confused to ask questions. Once the transfer clears, we're gone. Costa Rica has no extradition for financial crimes. We'll start over." My daughter, my only daughter, planning our disappearance like a business transaction. I sank onto the couch, phone in hand, staring at that message until the screen dimmed. My first instinct was to call her, to demand why, but I already knew the answer. Greed. It's always greed. Instead, I called the police. Detective Carla Brooks arrived that evening. She was in her 40s, with sharp eyes softened by empathy. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said, sitting across from me, "what you've described sounds like elder financial exploitation and possibly unlawful confinement." "Elder exploitation?" I repeated, like the words themselves were foreign. "Yes," she said gently. "Your daughter had access, forged your signature, and transferred funds. Locking your husband in the garage? That elevates this beyond financial abuse." I told her everything. About the forged papers, the missing jewelry, the phone calls that suddenly stopped coming while I was in Phoenix. She took photos of the broken lock and collected the folder as evidence. Before leaving, she said something that chilled me. "If they were planning to leave the country, your early return may have saved your husband's life." Those words replayed in my mind all night as I sat in the hospital beside Ray. He slept peacefully, unaware that the woman who used to braid her doll's hair beside my sewing machine had almost cost him his life. When morning came, I went home again, determined to find more proof. I checked the trash, every drawer, every file. and tucked behind our old printer, I found 2 one-way tickets. Orlando to San Jose, Costa Rica. Departure 3 days from now. That's when it hit me. If I hadn't come home early, they'd have been gone for good. And Ray, I don't even want to imagine what would have happened to him. I sat there, shaking, staring at those tickets. The tears wouldn't come anymore. I'd run out. There was only one thought left in my head. They were going to pay for what they did. The moment I saw Costa Rica printed on those tickets, I realized my daughter had turned into a stranger. Detective Brooks came back that afternoon with 2 other officers. They wore calm expressions, but I could tell from their eyes that what they'd seen in my house already told them plenty. I laid everything on the dining table, the power of attorney, the transfer slips, and the airline tickets. Brooks nodded slowly as she examined them. Mrs. Whitmore, this is bigger than a family disagreement. We're looking at forgery, fraud, and unlawful confinement. That's serious. She opened her notepad. Do you have any idea where Alyssa or Zane might be now? Not exactly, I said, staring at my hands. They live in a rental downtown, near High Street. But if those tickets are real, I think they plan to leave before I even got back. She asked to look through our computer. I gave her permission. Within minutes, her tech partner found email threads linking Alyssa's laptop to a shell company called Everstream Capital, LLC. It was registered under Zane's name just 4 months ago. The address on file led to a vacant office in Tampa, Florida. Brooks sighed. That company doesn't exist, at least not in any legitimate way. It's a common setup for laundering money through fake crypto funds. Crypto? I'd heard Zane mention it over and over at family dinners. Blockchain this, decentralized that. He made it sound like the future. But I always knew there was something slippery about his confidence. Too much talk, too little truth. The detective glanced back at me. Do you know if they had access to your husband's social security number or retirement accounts? They had access to everything, I whispered, because I trusted them. That trust felt like a bruise now, deep and dark, the kind that hurts when you breathe. Later that night, I went to the hospital again. Ray was more alert. His eyes lit up when he saw me, though confusion flickered behind them. May, he said softly, did you find Alyssa? She promised she'd come back after I rested. My heart cracked. Not yet, sweetheart. The police are helping. He nodded like a child being reassured about a storm. She's just confused, he murmured. She didn't mean harm. But she did. When I got home again, I noticed an envelope wedged behind the microwave, probably missed during their cleanup. Inside was a letter from Summit Mortgage Services, confirming approval for a home equity loan of $95,000, secured against our fully paid house. The signatures were ours, or at least they looked like ours. Alyssa had turned our home, the one Ray and I built with 40 years of sweat, into collateral for her escape. The next morning, Detective Brooks called. Mrs. Whitmore, we traced the transfer. The money left your account and went straight to an offshore wallet in Belize. From there, it was split between 3 smaller wallets, one in Zane's name, one in Alyssa's, and one anonymous. She paused before continuing. The good news is they haven't left the country yet. We have reason to believe they're still somewhere in Ohio, preparing to fly out. My breath caught. Can you find them? We're trying. We've already flagged their passports and tickets. If they show up at any airport, TSA will alert us. I thanked her, but the gratitude was hollow. None of this felt real. How could a woman I raised, who once cried because she accidentally broke a neighbor's window, now forge my name, steal my life, and lock her own father away? That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the couch, surrounded by papers, watching the clock tick past midnight. Every minute felt stolen. Every second, a reminder that my husband's gentle eyes had been trapped in that dark garage while our daughter counted down to freedom. The following evening, Detective Brooks came again, this time with news that both terrified and relieved me. We found their car, she said, abandoned outside an Airbnb near Cincinnati. Inside were empty boxes, 2 duffel bags, and a laptop. She opened it right there on my kitchen table. Within minutes, she'd uncovered a folder labeled Plan B. Inside were screenshots of wire transfers, fake IDs, and a document titled Property Rental San Jose. They were already negotiating for a 6-month stay in Costa Rica. Brooks exhaled. Mrs. Whitmore, your daughter and her husband were about 3 days away from vanishing completely. If you hadn't come home early, your husband might not have survived another night in that garage. Those words made my hand shake, because deep down, I knew she was right. The detective stood, gathering the laptop. We'll be issuing a warrant by morning. I promise you, we'll bring them in. After she left, I sat in the quiet again, the hum of the refrigerator filling the space between my thoughts. I looked at our wedding picture, the one Alyssa hadn't packed away yet. Ray and I were so young in it, hopeful, simple. The world hadn't yet taught us that betrayal could come from a place called home. I whispered into the dark, more to myself than anyone else. They almost got away, but not this time. When the call came from the detective, I thought my heart would stop. They'd found my daughter. It was early morning, the kind of gray dawn that makes everything look faded. I was making tea in the hospital cafeteria when my phone buzzed. Detective Brooks' voice came through, calm but urgent. Mrs. Whitmore, we located Alyssa and her husband. They're at the Columbus International Airport right now, trying to board a flight to Miami. I gripped the phone tighter. You're sure? Yes, ma'am. TSA flagged their tickets. They were booked under false names, but the passports gave them away. Officers are on the ground. They'll be taken into custody within minutes. I didn't know what to say. Relief and heartbreak collided in my chest like a storm. My own daughter was being arrested, and I couldn't decide whether to cry or thank God. When I reached the hospital room, Ray was awake, staring out the window. I told him softly, they found Alyssa and Zane. He blinked slowly, his lips parting, like he was trying to understand words in a foreign language. She's coming home? No, I whispered, not this time. Later that day, Detective Brooks met me at the hospital. She looked both exhausted and satisfied. They didn't resist. We found about $8,000 in cash, their passports, and several fake IDs in their bags. They also had printed bank documents, all linked to your accounts. It's solid evidence. I sat there in silence, watching my husband sleep, while the detective explained how the next steps would unfold. Charges, bail hearings, court proceedings. Every word felt unreal. That evening, the story hit the local news. Ohio couple arrested for elder exploitation and financial fraud. Our names were withheld, but everyone who knew us could read between the lines. The whisper started within hours. Neighbors calling, old church friends sending texts, some sympathetic, others just nosy. I ignored them all. What hurt most was the photo they used of Alyssa, a smiling picture from her CPA firm's website. My girl, looking polished, professional, normal. No one could see the monster behind that smile. 3 days later, Detective Brooks called again. We've searched their apartment, she said. You might want to sit down for this. I was already sitting. They'd moved almost everything out, but in the trash, we found torn paperwork for a property rental in San Jose, Costa Rica, a letter from a lawyer confirming offshore transfers, and, Mrs. Whitmore, she hesitated, we found a journal. My heart dropped. Alyssa's? Yes, it appears she kept notes about the whole plan, dates, instructions, even reminders to keep Dad locked in at night. My stomach turned. You're telling me she wrote it all down? Yes, ma'am. It's meticulous, and it confirms everything we already suspected. I pressed my palm to my forehead. Why would she write it down? Brooks sighed. Guilt or arrogance, sometimes both. When I hung up, I walked outside into the hospital garden. The air smelled of damp earth and winter grass. I sat on a bench and cried quietly, those heavy, soundless tears that come when words stop working. I raised that girl to be kind. I taught her about faith, about right and wrong. I gave her everything I could. And now, she'd written instructions on how to starve her father for money. 2 weeks passed before the preliminary hearing. The first time I saw Alyssa in handcuffs, my knees went weak. She looked thinner, but her eyes, those same eyes that once begged me for bedtime stories, were hard now, like she'd built walls even guilt couldn't climb. She tried to smile at me from across the courtroom. I couldn't move. The judge read the charges aloud. Elder abuse, unlawful confinement, financial fraud, forgery, and attempted flight from prosecution. Each word felt like a blade. Zane stood beside her, head down, pretending remorse. I knew better. That man never felt a thing. When court ended, Alyssa's lawyer approached me outside. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said cautiously, "my client wants you to know she's sorry. She claims she didn't mean for things to go this far." I stared at him. "She locked her father in a garage," I said quietly. "There's no meant to in that." He didn't respond, just nodded and walked away. That night, back home, I stood in front of the locked garage door, the one that once held my husband prisoner. The padlock was gone, but the holes from the screws were still there. I ran my fingers over them like scars. That's when I realized something simple but sharp. Forgiveness might be godly, but some sins don't deserve the comfort of forgetting. The day I took the stand, I didn't feel like a mother anymore. I felt like a witness to my own family's destruction. It was a cold Tuesday morning when the court clerk called my name. My hands shook as I took the oath. The courtroom felt too bright, too quiet, like the whole world was holding its breath. Alyssa sat across the room, dressed in beige prison clothes, her hair tied back. She wouldn't look at me. "Mrs. Whitmore," the prosecutor, Dana Mills, began softly, "can you describe what you found when you returned home from Phoenix?" I took a deep breath. "I found my husband locked inside our garage. The door had been padlocked from the outside. He was weak, dehydrated, and covered in sweat. He thought I told Alyssa to keep him there." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Alyssa flinched, then lowered her head. I went on, each word heavier than the last. "When I broke the lock, I found him sitting on the concrete floor with nothing but a thin blanket. There was a water bottle and a bucket in the corner. He had been there for days, maybe longer." The prosecutor nodded gently. "And what did you discover afterward regarding your finances?" "That our savings were gone," I said. "Over $100,000 withdrawn from our joint account. My signature was forged on power of attorney papers. The money had been transferred to a fake company under my son-in-law's name." "Do you see your daughter in this courtroom?" I looked at Alyssa. My voice broke when I said, "Yes." "And can you tell the court who she is?" "She's my daughter," I whispered. "My only child." For a moment, everything went still. I could hear the creak of someone shifting on a bench behind me. The judge watched quietly, expression unreadable. The prosecutor handed me a photograph, one the police had taken of the garage the day they found Ray. I couldn't look at it for long. "Your Honor," she said, "this is where the victim was kept. No food, no light, no way to call for help." The defense attorney rose. "Objection, Your Honor. The prosecution is using emotional evidence to bias the jury." The judge shook her head. "Overruled. Continue." When cross-examination came, Alyssa's lawyer tried to paint her as a woman under her husband's control. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, "isn't it true that your daughter was always obedient, always eager to please, that she might have been pressured or manipulated by her husband?" I looked him straight in the eye. She wasn't pressured. She was planning this for months. I saw the emails, the text messages. She told him, "He'll forget. Give it another day." That's not confusion. That's cruelty. A few people in the audience wiped tears. Even the judge looked down for a moment. When I stepped down from the stand, Alyssa finally looked up. Our eyes met. For 1 second, I saw the little girl she used to be, the one who brought me dandelions and called them flowers. But that image faded fast, replaced by the woman who stole our life savings and left her father to die. Ray couldn't testify. The doctor said it would be too hard on him. But they played a short video of him from the hospital, his frail voice saying, "I just kept thinking May forgot me." The entire courtroom went silent. Even Alyssa cried. But I didn't. My tears had already run dry. That night, when I got home, the reporters were waiting outside our gate. Microphones, cameras, flashing lights. "Mrs. Whitmore, how does it feel to see your daughter on trial? Do you believe she deserves prison time?" I walked right past them, shut the gate, and didn't say a word. Inside, the house was too quiet again. The padlock holes on the garage door still glared at me like open wounds. I stood there, whispering, "You did the right thing, May." I needed to hear it out loud, because a mother's heart never fully believes it. A few weeks later, the news broke that Zane had taken a plea deal. He'd agreed to testify against Alyssa in exchange for a reduced sentence. The world called it cooperation. I called it betrayal stacked on betrayal. Detective Brooks told me over the phone. His statement confirms what we already knew, Mrs. Whitmore. Your daughter planned the entire scheme. Zane followed her lead. I didn't know whether to feel vindicated or destroyed, because now I couldn't even tell myself she'd been manipulated. It had been her idea all along. And that's when something inside me changed. The grief started turning into steel. I didn't want revenge. I wanted accountability. I wanted the world to know what happens when love is replaced by greed. The trial was far from over, but I knew one thing for sure. The daughter I'd raised was gone. And in her place stood a stranger who saw money where she should have seen family. When Zane took the stand, I finally learned how far my daughter had fallen and how deep greed can go before it destroys everything. The courtroom was fuller that day. Reporters, law students, even people from our church, all waiting for what they called the turning point. I sat quietly, my hands folded in my lap, while Zane, my son-in-law, swore an oath on the same Bible my husband once used to teach Sunday school. He looked cleaner than I'd expected. Jail hadn't broken him yet. His voice was calm, rehearsed, almost professional. "I'm here to tell the truth," he said. The prosecutor, Dana Mills, began, "Mr. Carter, tell the court how this plan began." He glanced at Alyssa before answering. It was Alyssa's idea. You could hear the air leave the room. Even the judge's pen stopped moving. "She said her parents were sitting on a lot of money," Zane continued. "Retirement funds, savings, no debts. She said her father's memory was slipping and her mother trusted her completely. She told me she could get power of attorney signed without questions. My job was to set up the crypto company so we could invest the money." Dana leaned closer. "Did you have any legitimate investments lined up?" Zane shook his head. "No, ma'am. It was a shell. The plan was to move the money through several accounts, make it look like it was tied up in digital currency, and then relocate overseas, Costa Rica." My chest tightened. Hearing it from his mouth made it too real. "And what about Mr. Whitmore?" the prosecutor asked. "Why was he confined in the garage?" Zane hesitated. "Because he kept asking questions. Alyssa said if he talked to neighbors or called you, the plan would fall apart. She said it was safer that way. I told her it was wrong. She said he'd forget." I closed my eyes. Those 3 words, "he'd forget," cut deeper than any knife. The prosecutor nodded. "So you admit to participating?" "Yes," Zane said. "I did everything she asked. I moved the money, I helped forge the papers, I bought the tickets. But it was all her design. She was the one who said, 'Mom won't believe a thing if we act fast.'" A murmur spread across the courtroom. Alyssa sat rigid, tears streaming down her face. When her lawyer stood for cross-examination, his voice was tense. "Mr. Carter, you've already made a plea deal, correct?"
Yes. And that deal reduces your sentence if you testify against my client, doesn't it? Yes, but it doesn't change what happened. So you'll say whatever they want if it helps you. Zane's jaw tightened. I'm saying what's true. The back and forth went on for over an hour. Every detail was like reopening a wound. The fake emails, the loan against our home, even the notes Alyssa had written reminding herself to check the locks at night. By the time Zane stepped down, the jury's faces told the whole story. They didn't see her as a victim anymore. The next day, Alyssa took the stand. Her voice trembled. Her words came out rehearsed but brittle. I never meant to hurt anyone, she said. I thought I was helping manage things. Zane handled all the transfers. I just signed what he told me to. The prosecutor stood, holding up one of the text screenshots. Miss Miller, this message was sent from your phone. It reads, "He's crying again. He'll forget. Give it another day. Were you referring to your father?" Alyssa wiped her eyes but said nothing. Were you, Miss Miller? Yes, she whispered. And this other message? Once the house is in our names, we're free. What did you mean by that? Silence. The prosecutor waited. Miss Miller, the court needs your answer. I meant, we'd start over, Alyssa muttered, without them interfering. Without them interfering. That phrase echoed through my mind like thunder. To her, we weren't parents anymore. We were obstacles. The jury watched her crumble under her own words. By the time she stepped down, even her own attorney looked defeated. That night, I sat beside Ray in the hospital again. He'd been following bits of the trial through news updates, though I wished he wouldn't. Is she gonna be okay? He asked softly. I didn't know how to answer. How do you tell a man that his little girl is gone, replaced by greed and deceit? I squeezed his hand. She'll face what she's done, Ray. That's all we can hope for. He nodded slowly, looking out the window. I keep thinking, maybe if we'd said no less, hugged more. I didn't reply. Guilt is a cruel thing. It creeps in even when you've done nothing wrong. The following week, the trial moved to closing arguments. The prosecutor's voice was steady but heavy. This case isn't about money, she told the jury. It's about trust. It's about a daughter who saw her parents not as people to protect, but as assets to exploit. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore gave her love, and she turned it into leverage. When the jury was dismissed for deliberation, I stayed seated, staring at the empty witness box. That was where truth had finally won. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like standing over ashes after a fire. They said the jury would take at least a day. They came back in 4 hours. And in that silence before the verdict was read, I realized, whatever they decided, nothing would ever fix what she broke.
When the verdict was read, the room froze. And for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. The judge asked everyone to rise. The clerk's voice was steady, but I could hear her swallow hard before reading. On the charge of elder abuse, guilty. On the charge of unlawful confinement, guilty. On the charge of financial fraud, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. Each word landed like a nail sealing a coffin I never wanted built. Alyssa bowed her head and began to cry silently. Zane didn't look up. The air in the courtroom was thick with everything unsaid, grief, disbelief, and the sound of lives breaking quietly. The judge thanked the jury and set the sentencing date for the following month. Reporters whispered from the back, already typing their stories. The words family betrayal echoed faintly through the hallway. After court adjourned, the prosecutor, Dana Mills, approached me. Mrs. Whitmore, she said gently, justice isn't always clean, but this was the right outcome. I hope you find some closure. I nodded, though I wasn't sure closure existed for something like this. I don't hate her, I said softly, but I can't love what she did either. The sentencing hearing came 5 weeks later. I wrote a victim impact statement, 5 pages long. I poured every memory into it. How Ray called out for me from the dark, how he shook in my arms like a child, how I found our life savings gone, and our home turned into collateral for their escape. When it was my turn, I stood before the judge. My voice didn't tremble this time. I raised my daughter to be kind, I said, to care for others. I taught her that money means nothing if it costs you your soul. But somewhere along the line, she stopped hearing that part. She stopped seeing us as family. And now she's just another stranger in the system. The courtroom was silent, except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. The prosecutor recommended the maximum, 12 years. The defense asked for leniency, claiming remorse, stress, and influence from Zane. The judge took her time before speaking. "Miss Miller," she said firmly, "you exploited your parents' love and your father's vulnerability. You took advantage of their trust and used it as a weapon. This court finds no reason for mercy." Then she turned to Zane. "And you, Mr. Carter, built this scheme on deceit. You preyed on the elderly, on family, and on trust itself. For that, this court sentences you to 8 years in federal prison." Zane nodded quietly, like he expected it. Alyssa's sobs filled the room. The judge continued, "Miss Miller, you are sentenced to 12 years in federal custody." I didn't clap. I didn't cry. I just breathed, slow and deep. Because for the first time since that night, my husband's freedom felt real again. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. "Mrs. Whitmore, do you forgive your daughter? What will you do now?" I kept walking. Forgiveness, I thought, isn't a word you can force. It's something that either grows over time or dies under the weight of what's been done. In the months that followed, life felt different. Ray came home from the hospital, slower now, quieter. Sometimes he'd sit by the window and ask, "Is Alyssa coming for dinner?" I'd just smile gently and say, "Not tonight, dear." He never remembered she was in prison, and maybe that was a mercy. Our finances took longer to recover. The court ordered restitution, but the money was gone, scattered across accounts we'd never trace. We refinanced the house, sold the car, and learned to live smaller. But at least we were living. Together. One evening, as I tucked Ray into bed, he looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "You know, May," he whispered, "the devil doesn't always wear horns. Sometimes she wears your daughter's smile." I held his hand and felt the truth of it in my bones. After everything, I decided to donate what little was left in our joint account to an organization that helps seniors facing financial abuse. It felt right, like turning pain into something useful. And when the reporter from the local paper called again, asking if I wanted to share my story of survival, I said yes. But I told her to title it simply, "The Price of Betrayal." Because that's what it was, a price. And we paid it in love, trust, and time we'll never get back. I still see her sometimes. Not in person, but in memories that won't leave me alone. It's been a year since the sentencing. Ray and I live quietly now, in a smaller house on the edge of town. The mornings are slow, soft, filled with the sound of the kettle and old jazz humming from the radio. Sometimes I catch myself listening for Alyssa's car pulling into the driveway, like it used to when she visited on Sundays, but it never comes. Ray's memory has grown weaker. There are days when he calls me Mama, days when he doesn't remember the house or why we had to leave the old one. But there's one thing he never forgets, how much he loves me. And that's enough to keep me going. He still asks about Alyssa, though not as often. The last time he did, I told him she's away for work. He smiled, nodded, and said, "Tell her to be safe." I didn't correct him. Some truths are too cruel for broken minds to carry. After everything, I have learned that justice doesn't always feel like peace. The court gave us closure on paper, 12 years for her, 8 for him, but real life doesn't wrap up neatly. There's no moment where the pain just stops. You just learn to breathe around it. I still have that folder, the one that started it all, Power of Attorney, Urgent. I keep it in the drawer by the bed, not as a reminder of betrayal, but as proof of survival. Every time I look at it, I remember how close we came to losing everything, and how, somehow, love pulled us back. Sometimes at night, when Ray's asleep, I sit by the window and think about the past. The first time Alyssa learned to ride a bike, the night she graduated, the way she used to dance barefoot in the kitchen. I hold those memories close because they belong to the daughter I once had, the one who existed before greed took her away. I've also learned something I wish I could teach every parent. Trust is a gift, not a guarantee. You can love someone with your whole heart and still not see the darkness growing inside them. Love doesn't always protect you from betrayal. Still, I believe in kindness. I believe in forgiveness, even if I can't give it fully yet. Maybe one day, when time has done its healing, I'll be able to look at her and feel something softer than anger. But today, I'm not there yet, and that's okay. If there's one thing I've taken from all this, it's that silence is dangerous. Too many people suffer quietly because they're afraid of what others will think. If you ever notice something off, missing money, sudden changes, isolation, don't ignore it. Speak up, ask questions, protect the ones who can't protect themselves. Because evil doesn't always break down your door. Sometimes it walks in smiling, holding your spare key. So, to everyone listening to my story, don't wait until it's too late to pay attention to the people you love. And if you've ever been betrayed by family, I want you to know this. You can survive it. You can lose almost everything and still find peace again. I look at Ray sleeping now, his breathing soft and steady, and I whisper to myself the same words I told him the night we came home from the hospital. We're still here. We're still together. That's more than enough. And that's the truth I want to leave you with. No matter who turns against you or how deep the betrayal cuts, love, when it's real, always finds a way to stay. If this story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Alyssa's sentence was fair? Would you ever forgive if you were in my place? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this. Because here on Mabel's Stories, we tell the truths families hide and the lessons hearts never forget.